Financial Argument. Follow us on YouTube.
It's going to be a historic move. I think the silver move up will be one of the most volatile market moves in history, and good for the Bitcoin people. It just went from 1,200 to over 4,000. That's the kind of move silver is going to make, something similar.
And back with us today is Bill Murphy from the Gold Antitrust Action Committee and La Metropole Cafe. Bill, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be back, EJ. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'd first like to discuss the silver market. James Turk recently released an analysis on the silver market, and this was released on King World News. And he's saying that it looks like what's happening right now in the silver market, it looks like a repeat of what happened right before the run-up in 2010 and 2011 when silver went to $50 an ounce. What is your perspective on his analysis, and do you agree?
Well, I looked it over carefully, and James is a smart guy, and I appreciate what he has to say. I know I've been on your show a number of times, and I'm a $100 silver guy, but I have been right for a year or two, and this just goes on and on and on. J.P. Morgan continues to control the market, and I believe that they're going to lose control of it once it moves above 21, and James is going to be right. The timing is just so difficult. I mean, he's going back and looks over decades of technical analysis and teacup formation and this and that, and it's all extremely valid, and I think he's going to be right. Excuse me. It's just the timing of this has been just brutal. I mean, it's just in total control. The one thing I can say, if I can add something to bring something to the party here, is that the open interest in silver, which has been historically extremely high, above 200,000, is been contracting of late, and then the high open interest on the COMEX, which is the number of shorts and longs, to me represents J.P. Morgan and their associates' control over the market. And what you'd like to see theoretically is for the open interest to tank and for the bad guys, as I call them, to exit their short positions, which will set up what James was talking about. Because when we had that run in 2011 from 16 to 50, the open interest was 135,000 contracts all the way up. J.P. Morgan either let the price go up or were forced to let it go. And that's what we want to see again, so this nonsense will end. I mean, $17 silver in this day and age with other asset prices where they are is ridiculous.
Now, I know in the article, James Turk was saying that when silver finally exceeds $50 an ounce, that'll be like the base then for the bull market to really start. And you were just saying that your target has always been $100 silver. So in your view, is it really not until we get to $50 silver that the real bull market actually starts?
Well, for me, it'll start when it takes over 21 again after putting up with these past years of these pitiful prices. But I understand exactly what James is talking about, and it makes sense because we've been to 50 twice. And when that level is taken out, all heck could break loose because of supply shortages and things which are going to develop. So I understand where he's coming from. I know there's some other people, talking silver in the hundreds, and it could very well be. I mean, I'd just be thrilled if it gets to 100, but can it keep going? And what I do know about markets is where most of the big money is made is the people that get in late. And in the sense of, if you now at 17, it goes to 34, that's a big deal. Well, you'll make $17. Well, people get in at $52 and they'll go to 100, they make $50. But it's very difficult for investors to pay up, especially if you got out down at these levels. Who wants to pay up, $30 or $40 to get back in the market? So that's why people need to hang in there at these, what I call pitiful prices, because fortunes are going to be made, and James Turk is going to be right. The timing is still questionable. I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later.
If I could ask you a little bit more about, you were saying the open interest in silver has been contracting. For our viewers who aren't too, market savvy, can you explain a little bit more about what that means and why that is bullish for silver?
Well, again, the open interest is the number of longs and shorts in a market, and for silver, it's been above 210,000 for some time now, and made a all-time high of 234,000 last year, and the old all-time high was 192,000 contracts. And what we're looking for is for what I'm looking for is for somebody like J.P. Morgan to want to get out of their short side positions. And because they know that after a 6-7 year bear market, that the silver market is going to do what James Turk is talking about, explode. And, they don't want to take those kind of losses. The game will just end. They won't be able to do it anymore. And there's been a lot of talk over the years about J.P. Morgan's visible cash position on the COMEX and silver, number of ounces and so on, but it hasn't meant a thing in terms of the price action. And what we want to see is the bad guys, as I call them, hit the wall where they just can't stop the price anymore. And again, you go back to what James is talking about, it's going to be a historic move. I think the silver move up will be one of the most volatile market moves in history, and good for the Bitcoin people. It just went from 1,200 to over 4,000. That's the kind of move silver is going to make, something similar.
Now, what are you seeing in the gold market right now? Well,
we know that the gold cartel, as I call it, is doing everything they can to stop gold from taking out psychologically important $1,300 level. The open interest in gold, unlike silver, has exploded to over 500,000 from below 400,000, which means they're selling and selling and selling to prevent the price from going to where it should. And they've been doing this ring around the rosy thing forever, but at some time it's going to overpower them. But we haven't reached that stage yet, and they can stop the market when they feel like they need to.
Now, you were recently on Gold Seek Radio, and you were talking about how the cartel is losing control and that the end of the manipulation could come as early as this fall.
Well, it's a hope trade on my part, surely. But, what the reasons for gold and silver just to take off are just keep building and building. And they've been negated by what this, the gold cartel, the bullion banks and the U.S. government and others are doing to stop it. Eventually, it's going to overpower them, where the physical market demand for owning gold and silver will just make it impossible for them to keep the prices down here. We get closer and closer, but they're still there, and they keep stopping it. So, the odds are, with what the stock market has done, going straight up and never allowed to correct, something is likely to occur out of nowhere to upset the apple cart, and, the fall is a good time for that.
Right. I know Mike Maloney just put out a video, and he was showing that multiple different indicators were showing that the economy and stock market are peaking. So what is your perspective on, do you think the economy and stock market are peaking right now?
Well, there's all kinds of talk from that in our camp, and it never seems to happen. I understand it because I think things are far worse than the establishment is letting on and the press reports. So I can understand where Mike comes from on that, and it's just a question of when you look for signs that the people in control of the market, and the stock market is the Counterparty Risk Management Policy Group and the Plunge Protection Team. They make sure there's never any corrections. It's been this way since the Trump election. And things just never change. As soon as they start to change, things are propped up, or like gold is taken down away from 1,300 like it was last week. And they're blatant about it. And since nobody reports on it, they just keep doing it. But, I can see where it could happen, and it'll probably happen out of nowhere and be dramatic because, again, it will overpower them, and it'll be something to behold.
Now, before we let you go, I was wanting to touch on one last topic. It was about the Treasury Secretary going down to Fort Knox, and we were talking before the interview and you were saying, the Treasury Secretary said the gold is safe there, but he didn't say there was actually any gold there. What is your perspective on the visit recently by the Treasury Secretary to Fort Knox?
Well, to me, it's a big deal. And in a sense, I spent weeks helping this Wall Street Journal reporter do an article, for the paper, and it was titled, Fed has 62 tons of gold in New York basement, or does it? This is the headline, front page Wall Street Journal. This was on the 11th of August. And just coincidentally, after the first time in something like 73 years, the Treasury Secretary makes a trip to Fort Knox and then puts it out, got all kind of coverage yesterday afternoon. And, what the heck was triggered by this article in the Wall Street Journal, which, by the way, I spent all this time on, and one of the only things that they cut out of the article was GATA, Chris Powell and myself, and what we had to say. So, but at the same time, some of our issues were discussed by friends of ours like James McShirley and John Embry and so on. But, it just can't be a coincidence. And you wonder what the heck was triggered by this Wall Street Journal article to have the Treasury Secretary go down there and then come out and say the gold is safe because it's surrounded by all these troops. Well, what kind of childish Mickey Mouse comment is that? What we wanted to have is a real legitimate outside audit, and they won't do it. And so nothing has changed, except you have to think behind the scenes something was really stirred up here for him to be feel compelled to do that. So I'm going to have some fun with it.
So if the gold isn't there, where do you think it is?
Well, it's a long story to get into, but basically they were supposed to have 8,135 tons of gold, and we don't know what is there or not, but we believe a lot of it has been swapped with other countries and sold, because basically we're not supposed to sell our gold, but we could sell somebody else's gold in the terms of gold swaps and so on. So we think it's been compromised in many ways, and that basically the central banks, which are supposed to have 30,000 tons of gold, probably have nowhere near that, probably have something like 10,000 tons of gold. We've covered that from the Gotecamp standpoint for nearly 2 decades now, and we just don't know what kind of physical gold that the United States has in its possession, how much of it has been compromised. And they refuse to do an audit, and they refuse to answer any questions about it on the record. And it's such a sensitive subject, the reporters won't even ask the Fed or Treasury these questions to go on the record about what is the status of our physical gold. So people don't really understand this, but it's a big, big deal. And as Chris Powell, my colleague, says, the United States would rather disclose our nuclear secrets than our gold secrets.
All right. Well, Bill Murphy, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we let you go, did you want to share with the viewers any last thoughts you had and where they can find you online?
Well, Chris Powell, can go to www.gada.org, and he puts out